Hey, welcome back to Justice and Judgment with Chris, sponsored by Psalms 89:14 Ministries. I am deep in my bunker in an undisclosed location, deep in the heart of Texas. Hey, listen, last Saturday, October the 7th, today is Friday, October the 13th, 2023. Last Saturday, um, war broke out in the Middle East, and a lot of guys jumped on and gave their opinions and what they thought was going on. I wanted to wait a while. Um, the Lord had given me a dream back in 1986. Michael Snyder had posted that on his website back in 2000. I want to say 17, but it could have been 2019. My numbers are a little bit jacked up right now. But so I have my opinion, but that doesn't mean a whole lot. And so I wanted to kind of see where this thing was headed. And, it could go south, and it goes south pretty quick. Once Hezbollah jumps in and gets involved in this, I don't think it's any time at all before. Of course, we already know Iran is funding this thing and is back behind it, but they could get physically involved. We've already sent two carrier groups over there, strike groups, and that's a lot. I think it's the USS Gerald Ford and the Dwight Eisenhower. But that concerns me mostly because of a vision that Henry Gruver had, and I've talked about him in the past, um, of when we go back to the Middle East, that's when Russia will attack, and of course we'll have to cross the bear to get back to our guns, and that that has me concerned. But we're not there just yet. But I did want to get somebody else's opinion, somebody that I highly value their opinion, somebody that's been in this business for a long time. And Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, Bob McGinnis, he was on my show, a couple of months ago. He's got some books out. I've got three of them: Kings of the East, The Progressive Evil, and his latest one, Divided We Stand. Good books, serious reading. You got to sit down and pay attention to what you're doing. Pretty thick books, too. They're not easy to get through in one day. But he's got a book that he put out in 2015 called Never Submit. And that's getting a lot of traction now because he talks about the Middle East and things. Anyway, I had contacted him. I saw him on another show. Said, "Hey, Bob, I loved that interview. It was great. Notice you're on vacation. Hey, maybe sometime later in the month we can get together, maybe do, 15 minutes or so." He said, "Hey, man, I don't know what it's going to look like a month from now. So how about now?" So I quickly threw a couple questions together, and within less than 2 hours, we were doing a short little show. So I'm going to tag that on the back end of this, but I just wanted to share with you what I really feel the church needs to know right now, because as that book says, divided we stand. The church is very divided right now. I've shared with a lot of my Christian friends what the Lord showed me in dreams, in visions, and asked them what they thought about the current affairs. And a lot of them are like, either don't have a clue, or they just go, "Well, this has been going on for a million years and it's never going to change, and things are going to always be the same as they are." Well, that's always not a good way to look at things. I think it was in was it First or Second Peter? He said, "Hey, where is the coming? Things have always been this way, and they'll always continue to be this way." Well, when you say things like that, you're actually fulfilling prophecy. So I believe that we need to be situationally aware of what's going on around us. Jesus said to the Pharisees, "You guys know what the weather's like by looking at the sky, but you can't discern the sign of the times." And we are walking in some serious times right now. And so anyway, I think it's time, and I've said this once, and I've said it 20 times. This battle is going to be fought on our knees. Ephesians 6 says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Folks, we are called to walk in love, to speak the truth in love, but to be awake and aware. You know, in Proverbs it says, you know, blessed is a man that I find standing or sitting or what it was waiting at my gates, you know, looking for me. And that's what we need to be, sitting at the gate, watching and waiting. We need to be watching for the coming of the Messiah, our Lord Jesus Christ. We are supposed to be watching. You know, some of us, you know, I believe, I don't call myself a prophet, but I do call myself, and I believe the Lord's told me I'm a watchman. You know, sometimes I see things at 30,000 feet and 100 miles out. I just see things coming that a lot of other people don't, but I pay attention to. You know, I know that we are in a serious predicament. Look at our southern border. We got people by the millions pouring across that border. Many of them from countries not Mexican nationals, but they're from China, they're from Russia, they're from Syria, they're from Iraq, they're from Iran. We've had a lot of Middle East terrorists get caught at the border. We had in 1 month more caught at the border than we did in the 4 years that Trump was in office. Now, here's the scary part about that, is that we don't know about the gotaways. You see, because a lot of people that are coming across the border, there's a big percentage of those that we don't even know are here because they snuck across. They didn't check in. They didn't write their name. They didn't get a phone. They didn't give you a phone number and address where they're going to be at. They just came in and they're walking amongst us. So we are set and primed for terrorism. And I honestly believe with all my heart, it's not a matter of when, or not if, but when the next terror attack comes. And I believe that once, if we get heavily involved in this Middle East thing, which brings up a whole nother subject about Taiwan and China, because China just issued a warning not to get involved in the Taiwan Straits. We're tied up in Ukraine. We're tied up in the Middle East. There is no way on God's green earth we're going to be able to help those people over there in Taiwan. And if we even try, we'll fail. And with the current state of our administration being as weak as it is, I don't believe Joe Biden is going to last another 2 or 3 months. I believe before this year's over, we will have Kamala Harris as our president. He is just degraded to that point. He barely can put 2 words together. God bless him. I feel sorry for him, but the man's also a crook and a liar. And so justice is coming. How that justice looks, I don't know. But anyway, like I said, Ephesians 6 says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. Folks, we need to pray. We need to pray for our country. We need to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But we need to pray, and we need to pay attention. Look around you. See what's going on. Know the signs of the times. Okay, that's all I got. Bob McGinnis interview coming up next. God bless. All right, today I've got Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, Bob McGinnis, and I've got him briefly. He's a very busy man at this time of the year, I guess, or this time of the season. What's going on? Bob, we're in the midst of this Middle East war. Nobody knows where it's going, how long it'll last. You have different theological points of view on the eschatology of it. I have mine, you have yours. But what I am interested in, or what I found interesting is, and I don't know if you've seen the movie Golda that was done a couple of years ago, and it was about, is it Golda Meir? She was the prime minister back in 1973. Right. Of course, I don't remember this. I wasn't paying attention. I was 12 years old at the time. But the week before last, my wife and I just, out of the blue, decided to watch that movie. And so I thought it was real timely. But one thing I noticed on that is that they knew, or there was rumblings that they saw the gathering of the tanks and all that down there at the canal, but nobody did anything. And so there's a lot of speculation now. Why didn't IDF know? Why didn't our intelligence know? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, interestingly, Chris, in '73, I was at Ranger School when the Yom Kippur War broke out, and we were activated for the possible deployment to Israel. Why didn't they know? Well, I think it's really simple. We, the United States, as well as Israel and other key allies, have become over-reliant on technology. Those satellites, those listening ears that the NSA has, and other electronic means of cyber and the like. And we've withdrawn the very difficult type of spine that's critical, and that is human intelligence.
Right.
For many years, Mossad was very effective at placing some of its personnel inside those organizations, those terrorist organizations, and therefore, when it was time, they would tip off the Mossad about potential threats. Well, I don't know with certitude, but I believe this is exactly what's happened. What Hamas learned was that you can't do everything on the internet. You can't do everything on the telephone. You have to do it face to face with the real people, and you have to plan, to be basically have operational security by being silent in the airways. And that's evidently what they did. They did it, of course, with the likes of their friends in Tehran and the Ayatollah, and especially the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which, of course, is the conduit by which they receive most of their supplies, their military supplies,
right.
And, of course, their training and expertise. So I think that's fundamentally what's happened. Years ago, we had much better, Mossad had much better human intelligence than they do today. And the same thing is true with us. It's very, very time consuming, very expensive, but absolutely necessary.
Well, it seems like there is what do I want to say? Not a coincidence, but a very similar type of failure going on that went back in 1973, which oddly enough was exactly almost to the day 50 years ago.
Right.
And that almost seems prophetic in and of itself. The southern border, with Iran, probably more than likely we know is behind this, funding it. We've just given them or loosened up $6 billion was the last guesstimation I heard. The weapons that we left behind in that failed departure from Afghanistan is probably being used in this war, with us now sending out, I think now 2 battle groups. I know there was a second Air Force aircraft carrier sent to the Middle East. Does it make us vulnerable as the United States to possible terrorist acts?
Well, we are vulnerable. There's no question in my mind. You open the southern border, and you allow people to come in that we aren't trying to check on. Those that we do check, not the 1.6 million or more gotaways, those that we do check, we find a certain element, a certain percentage that are bad characters that are associated with terrorists, or criminals and the like. So it's an open invitation, which I believe, pretty certain, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, and others have taken advantage of. Where those cells are operating, when they will be triggered, to be determined. But we are vulnerable as a direct result of an open border. Now, you mentioned the $6 billion. Well, that is a lot of money, but it's only a drop in the bucket of other sanctions that we've given them relief in. And as a result, those funds that we've given relief to the Iranians are very fungible. And so, the Ayatollah, working through his, basically his man, Risi, who is the president over there, they're moving that money around and they're supporting the IRGC. That's why, effectively, they are the world's key sponsor of terrorism. And I think some of that money has infiltrated its way into this country in the terms of weapons and just the support of those operating cells that are eventually going to be triggered. We've had operations in this country by foreign agents. I suspect where the vulnerability is just increasing. And then you mentioned the Afghanistan debacle and the weapons and platforms we left behind. I don't think any of the platforms per se have infiltrated, certainly to Hamas and Gaza. Now, we left behind hundreds of thousands of small arms. That's quite possible. But for the most part, Hamas has been using Chinese and Russian-made arms, and that is a different munition than we left behind in Afghanistan. That doesn't mean that they haven't shipped some of those weapons and some of those ammunition and so forth, which is quite possible. I don't deny that. I haven't seen evidence that any of that has shown up, but it certainly has found its way to the black market. The Taliban is more than willing to, sell it to the high bidder, and they need money. So there's no question about that, perhaps.
Absolutely. And you mentioned China. And of course, I always end up going back to China, and you've written extensively about it. Here we are, we're fighting a proxy war basically in Ukraine. And now we've been, I don't want to say drug into this Middle Eastern war, but we've been sucked in. And so here you have China, who sees us totally distracted, and they have had their eyes on Taiwan. There's no way we could possibly defend Taiwan in the state we're in the state of, and we talked about this before, our president and the lack of respect that he has with the other countries.
Yeah, Mr. Biden is certainly not perceived as much of a threat elsewhere. The fact that we're engaged in Ukraine, I think, is a mistake. The war was unnecessary. Had we had a stronger president, I think if President Trump had still been in office, it wouldn't have happened. And I've written about that extensively. The Chinese, you're right, Chris, are taking advantage of this opportunity. They see that we have the USS Ford, USS Eisenhower, and their two strike groups that are very close to the Middle East and able to strike if necessary. We've bolstered our F-35s and other aircraft into the region as well, in Bahrain, UAE, and elsewhere, to include resupplying and meeting all the needs of Israel, which is a very important aspect of what we're doing. So when you see all that, they take an assessment. They know that our arms and our ammunition and so forth have been going to the Ukrainians. We are turning much of what we had with the U.S. Army Europe into helping the Ukrainians. And so we're tied down there. We're tied down now with a significant force in the Middle East. And we, meanwhile, have been trying to do what we can to help the Taiwanese and collaborating with the Koreans, the Japanese, the Filipinos, the Vietnamese, and others in the region, which are really testy because of the threat, a very legitimate threat posed by President Xi. His military is the largest in the world and will do whatever necessary in order to accomplish his end game, and that is not just taking over Taiwan, but dominating that region. And ultimately, I argue time and again that they see themselves as the Middle Kingdom, the big power in the world that ought to be controlling the world. So their relationships with the likes of Vladimir Putin, the Ayatollah in Iran, the North Koreans, much of the African continent, a growing portion of South America, and certain countries in Europe, they really are feeling their oats. They have problems, but they are really moving forward in a very dangerous way.
Well, and I noticed, I read a report online this morning, I believe, where they actually kind of gave a veiled threat to us about interfering with Taiwan and in the straits over there. So it's in the back of their head at the very least. Something else I wanted to bring up real quick before I let you go is you wrote a book called Never Submit. And now, was that back in the 70s or the 80s? When did you write that book?
Yeah, 2015. Okay. It was, I had been in Iraq a number of times. I've been to Israel quite a few times and elsewhere in that region. And I saw the genocide perpetrated by the Islamic State, which are really cousins to Hamas and other terrorist groups. But what they were doing in northern Iraq and eastern Israel or Syria was just pure evil. They would decimate entire towns. They'd slaughter, innocent people left and right. And of course, for a while, they were doing quite well under Obama, who didn't do nearly enough and was playing footsie with the Iranians,
Right.
which is really different, but they're still all radical. And then Trump came in and gave them sufficient resources to decimate, which we did most of, ISIS in Syria and northern Iraq. Now, we still have 2,500 troops inside Iraq, 850 in eastern Syria, trying to protect the Chaldeans and a number of other personnel, plus some resources up there. So we find that this is a very dangerous time, and that the proliferation, the instability that is growing not only in the Middle East but across the world doesn't bode well for the future.
Well, I before I let you go, I do want to bring up your book, Divided We Stand. I was just looking at chapter 7 in there, and section 3, where it talks about the division of the family and how that seems to be apparent. What we're doing now in this country is we're dividing the family, which ends up really dividing the nation, because that is the core of this nation. And so with the children against the parents, basically on their identity, their gender bending. And I found that very interesting and very informative. Would you like to comment some more on that? You wrote the book, so.
Yeah. As you know, Chris, it's the building block of societies, and it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve. God had a plan, and that plan is based upon the family. Families in a modern society, they pay taxes, they obey the laws, they have children, and they're peace abiding. They do the things that good societies want from their citizens. Unfortunately, the leftist government wants to do away with all that. They want to, tell boys that they're really girls and girls that they're boys. They want to kill the children in the womb. They want to educate them, not the parents to educate them, but the government wants them to be educated by government stooges who, in fact, manipulate them to believe that the government is their God and not the God of the heavens. So, all of this just paints a very clear picture of what the Marxists, the leftists, want to do to our society, and that's the family alone. And unfortunately, we've had decades of some very bad family policy in this country.
And I believe it has crept into the church, where the church is divided. I've spoken to several people since this started last Saturday, and they seem to be totally oblivious to what the ramifications could be and what the Bible says about it. And I've even heard, and I was at Peter, they say, well, this has been going on for years, nothing's going to change. Well, one day it's going to be that final one, and we're going to be at that time.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think we've been leaning in that direction for some time yet. Now, whether or not the instability that we currently have and the markers of prophetic end times begin to really show themselves in a very stellar way in the near future, I don't dismiss that at all. I'm very concerned. I'm working on another book now, and I've been reading some of the work of Chuck Missler. I knew Chuck briefly.
Miss him.
And a great man, a man of God who did some wonderful work, and he was really very concerned about what was happening in America, and this was years ago, and it's only accelerated since that time, especially the instability we're suffering from in our cities and our population today.
Well, Chuck Missler was one of the smartest men I think I've ever known. He had a great grasp on the Word of God. He was just amazing. Bob, I want to thank you so much for taking time out and visiting with me today. You had some great answers. And I want to remind everybody, Divided We Stand. It's a great book. And I'm going to check out that Never Submit and take a look at that. But you have a wonderful day. Once again, thank you, sir, and God bless.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Divine justice coming down, coming down. It's divine.